200 people heard the scream. That is not an estimate. That is the number the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department would later confirm based on security footage, witness statements, and cell phone location data pulled from the Riverside Elementary School dismissal zone on the afternoon of November 15th, 2024. 200 people, parents in idling SUVs, teachers on sidewalk duty, a crossing guard who had worked that corner for 9 years, a soccer mom in a silver Lexus with her windows cracked 2 inches because the weather was nice enough for fresh air, but not nice enough to commit to it. 200 people heard an 8-year-old girl scream, "Daddy," with enough force to crack the autumn sky wide open. Not one of them moved. Not one of them reached for a phone. Not one of them stepped off a curb or out of a car or away from a conversation. Not one of them did the single most basic thing a human being can do when a child screams for her father in the middle of a crowd. They looked. Some of them. A few turned their heads the way you turn toward a car alarm. Annoyed, curious, already deciding it was nothing, already filing it under someone else's problem. And then they looked away. Every single one of them, except one. A 13-year-old boy sitting in the passenger seat of a 2004 Honda Accord with 247,000 miles on the odometer and a crack in the windshield that ran from the bottom left corner to the center, like a river on a map that led nowhere good. His name was Emmett Sykes. He was homeless. He had not been inside a classroom in 186 days. And he had a memory that forgot nothing. Wren Coulter wore her daddy's vest every Friday. It was too big for her, way too big. The leather hung past her knees like a dress made for a giant, and the Hells Angels patch on the back grinned up at anyone who walked behind her. The skull with its wings spread wide, teeth bared in what might have been a smile or a warning depending on who was looking. She was 8 years old, 4'2", 51 pounds with her rain boots on, and she wore that vest like armor. She had started the tradition when she was 5. Boone Coulter, her father, would come home from a ride smelling like highway wind and motor oil, and the particular kind of freedom that only exists between the handlebars of a Harley-Davidson at 70 miles per hour, and Wren would run to the door and throw her arms around his waist and press her face into the leather until the smell soaked into her hair. One Friday morning, she had pulled the vest off the back of a kitchen chair and put it on over her school clothes. "Daddy's lucky day," she said. Boone had looked at his daughter drowning in leather and patches, the bottom of the vest dragging on the kitchen tile, and he had laughed so hard the coffee came out his nose. She wore it every Friday after that. It was her shield, her cape, her way of carrying her father with her into a world that did not always understand who they were or what that patch meant. Teachers gave her looks. Other parents whispered. A mother once asked the principal if it was appropriate for a child to wear gang insignia to school. Dr. Constance Whitfield, the principal, had called Boone in for a meeting. She had used words like dress code and appropriate messaging and learning environment. Boone had listened with his arms crossed and his hazel eyes steady, and when she finished, he said one sentence: "My daughter can wear whatever makes her feel safe." The meeting ended there. Now it was Friday again, November 15th. The sky over Sacramento was the color of dirty cotton, low clouds pressing down on the city like a hand trying to smother a candle. The temperature had dropped 12 degrees since morning, and a thin rain had come and gone, leaving the sidewalks dark and slick, and the gutters running with water that smelled like wet leaves and gasoline. Wren walked down the front steps of Riverside Elementary at 3:51 in the afternoon. She was carrying her art project, a crayon drawing on construction paper. Her daddy on his motorcycle, the wheels wrapped in orange and red flames she had added during free period, the crayon wax still soft enough to smudge if you touched it wrong. She held it carefully the way you hold something precious away from her body so the wet wouldn't get to it. Her pink rain boots squeaked with every step. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The boots had unicorn stickers on them. She had put them there herself carefully, one unicorn per boot, positioned just above the ankle where everyone could see. They were the kind of stickers that peeled at the edges after a few weeks, but Wren kept pressing them back down with her thumbnail, refusing to let them go. She reached the bottom of the steps and looked for her daddy's motorcycle. It wasn't there. That was strange. Boone picked her up every Friday. He would be standing by the bike helmet tucked under one arm, that big, slow grin spreading across his face when he saw her coming down the steps. She would run to him, boots squeaking, art project flapping, and he would scoop her up with one arm like she weighed nothing and set her on the back of the Harley and say the same thing every time. Ready to ride, little bird, ready, daddy. But today the spot where the Harley usually parked was empty. Just wet asphalt and a crushed soda can and the fading oil stain from last week's visit. Wren stopped at the bottom of the steps. She looked left. She looked right. She clutched her drawing tighter. And that was when the man said her name. Wren Coulter. She turned. He was standing 6 feet away. Tall, maybe 6'2". Built like the men who work construction on the new highway overpass she passed every morning, thick through the shoulders and neck. The kind of build that came from lifting things heavier than most people could imagine. He wore a black leather jacket. Not like Daddy's. Daddy's jacket was worn soft, lived and creased in all the right places from years of wind and weather. This jacket was stiff, new, like a costume, and on his neck crawling up from beneath the collar like something alive, a tattoo. A snake. Black ink. The head of it reached his jawline, the forked tongue almost touching his earlobe. He smiled at her, but it was wrong. Wren knew smiles. She knew the way her daddy smiled, slow and real, starting in his eyes before it ever reached his mouth. She knew the way Uncle Gravel smiled, rare and quick like sunlight through a crack in a storm cloud. She knew the way Doc smiled, gentle and patient, the smile of a man who had seen hurt and chosen to heal it. This man's smile started at his mouth and stopped there. His eyes stayed flat. His teeth showed too much. It was a smile that had been practiced in a mirror, not earned in a life. I don't know you, Wren said. She did not say it with fear. She said it with certainty, the way her father had taught her. If someone you don't know says your name, what do? I say, I don't know you. And I walk away. Your daddy sent me, sweetheart. The man's voice was smooth, Southern Georgia or Alabama. There's been an emergency. He needs me to pick you up. Lie. Wren knew it was a lie the way she knew the sky was gray and the ground was wet and her boots were pink. She knew it in her bones. Daddy always picked her up himself, or Uncle Gravel, or one of the brothers who wore the same patch she wore on her vest. Never a stranger. Never someone who smiled like a Halloween mask. No. Wren took a step backward. Her boots squeaked against the wet concrete. Daddy picks me up. She turned to run. The hand that closed around her arm was the size of a dinner plate. It squeezed. Something inside her arm made a sound like a knuckle cracking a pop that she felt more than heard, and a pain shot from her bicep to her shoulder that was sharper and hotter than anything she had ever felt in her 8 years of life. The man's fingers pressed into her skin hard enough to leave marks. Oval, dark purple, the exact shape of a grown man's grip on a child's arm. She would carry that bruise for weeks. Daddy Wren screamed it. She screamed it with her whole body, her whole chest, her whole heart. She screamed it the way a child screams when every instinct, every cell, every molecule of survival is firing at once, telling her that something is wrong. Something is very wrong, and the only person in the world who can fix it is not here. Daddy, her art project fell from her hands. The construction paper hit the wet sidewalk, and the crayon flames bled into the water, orange and red, dissolving into pale nothing. The sliding door of a white van flew open. A second man appeared. Shorter, 5'10", bald head shaved clean, the skin reflecting the gray light like a stone. Navy blue windbreaker zipped to the neck. White Adidas sneakers, and when he reached for her other arm, Wren saw it. His right hand was missing a pinky finger. The stump where it had been was smooth-healed over old. He grabbed her with 4 fingers and a gap, and the wrongness of it, the physical evidence that this man had already lost something to violence, sent a bolt of pure terror through her body. She kicked, she bit, she sank her teeth into the bald man's wrist with every ounce of 8-year-old fury she possessed, and she did not let go until she tasted copper, until she felt the skin break, until the man yanked his arm back with a curse, and she saw the blood welling up from the crescent-shaped wound her teeth had made. His eyes went from blank to rage in less than a second, and then she was inside the van. The door slammed shut. The engine was already running. The tires barked against the wet asphalt, and the van lurched forward and through the rear window, growing smaller with every second. Wren could see the steps of Riverside Elementary, the teachers on the sidewalk, the parents in their cars, the crossing guard at his post. None of them moving, none of them running, none of them reaching for a phone. 200 people watched a white van swallow an 8-year-old girl and disappear into the November gray, and not one of them did a single thing about it. But across the street, 60 feet from the school entrance, a car door flew open so hard it bounced against its hinges, and Emmett Sykes started running. He was not built for running. His body was thin in the way that hunger makes you thin the bones too close to the surface. His sneakers were held together with duct tape, the left sole flapping with every stride. His jeans were 2 inches too short. His gray hoodie had a hole in the left elbow. But he was running, 60 feet, 50, 40. Behind him in the back seat of the Honda Accord, his mother jerked awake. Nadine Sykes had been asleep for 3 hours. She had worked the overnight shift at Rosie's 24-hour diner, then driven here so that Emmett could watch the school while she slept. It was their routine. It had been for 7 months. Ever since the eviction notice turned their apartment into someone else's apartment and their life into this car. Emmett. Nadine sat up, her voice thick with sleep. Where are you going? But he was already gone. Emmett reached the school entrance 19 seconds after the van pulled away. He had counted. He always counted. Counting was one of the things his brain did automatically, the way other people's hearts beat or lungs breathed. Steps, seconds, license plates, faces. His mind cataloged everything it encountered and filed it away in perfect order, accessible at any time, fading never. His mother had a word for it. She had been a 911 dispatcher for 11 years before the budget cuts eliminated her position. She had spent those years listening to people in the worst moments of their lives, people who were scared and hurt and desperate, and she had learned that the difference between saving someone and losing them often came down to a single detail: a license plate number, the color of a jacket, the direction a car turned. Details save lives, Emmett. That is what she told him. When everything goes wrong, details are the only things that matter. So Emmett memorized everything. He had memorized the van the moment it circled the block. White. Dodge Ram ProMaster, 2019 model. Virginia plate 7 Romeo X-Ray 4138. Enterprise rent-a-car magnet on the driver's side door, but the magnet said Fairfax, Virginia. Wrong state. A rental from the East Coast driven all the way to Sacramento. That did not happen by accident. He had memorized the driver. 6'2", 230, black leather jacket, still if new. Timberland boots, size 13, he had seen the print in the mud by the curb. Snake tattoo on the neck, black ink, the head reaching the jawline. Scar on the left cheek, approximately 4 inches, looked like a burn. Southern accent. Georgia or Alabama. He had memorized the second man, 5'10", 175, bald, shaved clean, navy blue windbreaker. White Adidas sneakers, missing his right pinky finger. Limped on his left leg when he moved an uneven gait that had suggested an old ankle injury. Slower than the driver, compensated with his right arm. He had memorized the girl. Oversized leather vest, Hell's Angels patch, pink rain boots with unicorn stickers, denim overalls underneath, crayon drawing in her hands before they grabbed her. He had memorized the van turning left at Folsom Boulevard. And now standing at the school entrance with his chest heaving and his duct tape sneakers soaked through, and his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his teeth, he had one single desperate, consuming need. He needed someone to listen. Mrs. Herrera was the dismissal teacher. She was helping a kindergartner tie his shoe. She was a woman of about 40, with kind eyes and a lanyard full of keys, and the particular expression of someone who had been on duty since 2:30 and was counting the minutes until she could sit down. Emmett grabbed her arm. A girl just got kidnapped. White van, Virginia plates. It's been Romeo X-Ray 4138. 2 men, one with a snake tattoo on his neck. The other is bald with a missing pinky finger on his right hand. They grabbed her at 3:52. She was wearing a leather vest with a Hell's Angels patch. The van turned left at Folsom. He said all of this in one breath, every word clear, every detail precise. Mrs. Herrera's face moved through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, confusion, dismissal. Honey. She pulled her arm back. That is Boone Coulter's daughter. She probably got picked up by family. We cannot call 911 every time a child gets into a car. I saw them grab her. Emmett's voice cracked. He was 13 years old, but in this moment he sounded like the child he still was. She screamed, "Daddy," loud enough for everyone to hear. She bit one of them. Check the security cameras, please. Mrs. Herrera exchanged a look with Miss Oakes, the younger teacher standing 10 feet away. Emmett knew that look. He had seen it in grocery store parking lots when he asked to use the bathroom, in library lobbies when he sat too long in one spot, in every place where a boy who looked like he lived in a car was treated as a problem rather than a person. The look said, "Not my problem." "We will handle it," Mrs. Herrera said. The words were a door closing. "You need to leave school property." But Emmett did not leave. He turned and ran toward the main entrance. Through the double doors, past the secretary, a woman named Mrs. Purcell, who called after him in a voice sharp enough to cut glass. Down the hallway with the trophy cases and the student artwork and the banner that said Riverside Elementary, where every child matters. He burst into the principal's office. Dr. Constance Whitfield sat behind a desk made of dark wood with a brass nameplate and a bronze plaque that read, "Student safety is our priority." She was 52 years old. She had been principal for 14 years. She had 487 students and 32 faculty members, and a budget shortfall in a board meeting on Tuesday, and a stack of paperwork that never seemed to shrink. She looked up and saw a boy, not a student, a stranger, thin, dirty, tears streaming down his face. Homeless, her mind categorized before she could stop it. A girl was kidnapped. Emmett was crying now. He could not control it. The tears came from somewhere deeper than his eyes, from a place where the frustration and the fear and the knowledge that every second mattered were all tangled together in a knot he could not undo. White van, Virginia plate 7 Romeo X-ray 4138. 2 men, one had a snake tattoo. The other was missing his right pinky finger. They grabbed her at 3:52. She was wearing a leather vest. "Please, please call her dad. Please check the cameras." Dr. Whitfield looked at the boy in front of her. She looked at the tears and the thin frame and the duct-tape sneakers and the hoodie with the hole in the elbow. She looked at everything about him that said he did not belong here, in her office, in her school, in her world. And she made a decision. The wrong decision. "Young man," her voice was the temperature of a January sidewalk, "we do not tolerate false alarms. That was Boone Coulter's daughter. She is fine. If you disrupt this school again, I will call the police on you for trespassing." "I am not lying." Emmett's voice broke on the word. "I saw everything. Security." Dr. Whitfield did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The word carried the weight of authority, of institution, of a woman who had spent 14 years building walls around her school and had decided that this boy was on the wrong side of them. "Escort this boy off campus. If he returns, detain him." "Please." Emmett looked at the bronze plaque. "Student safety is our priority. Just check the cameras. Call her dad. That is all I am asking. We have protocols for emergencies," Dr. Whitfield said. She stood. Her chair rolled back on its wheels with a sound like a sigh. "We do not need a homeless child causing panic with wild stories for attention." 2 security guards appeared behind Emmett, hands on his shoulders. Firm. The kind of pressure that said, "Move or be moved." Emmett was escorted off campus like a criminal. Behind him inside the school, not a single person picked up a phone. Not a single person checked the security cameras. Not a single person called Boone Coulter to tell him that his daughter was gone. The system had spoken. The system did not care. Meanwhile, 60 miles away in a federal courthouse in downtown Sacramento, Boone Ironside Coulter was sitting in a conference room with 2 prosecutors and a United States Marshal going over his testimony for the 4th time. 11 months earlier, at a truck stop off Interstate 5, a man named Renzo Cortez had taken 3 bullets to the chest. Execution style. Boone had been there. He had seen the shooter's face, seen the way the man smiled before pulling the trigger. Victor Maddox, they called him the Ghost. He ran a criminal syndicate that stretched from Sacramento to Seattle, trafficking, extortion, contract killing. He had been untouchable for 15 years, until Boone Coulter decided to talk. The federal prosecutors had promised protection for him and for Ren. That protection extended exactly as far as the courthouse steps. The trial was set for Monday, 3 days from now. If Boone testified, Maddox would spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. If Boone did not, the syndicate had made the terms painfully clear. Recant or your daughter dies. Boone had received the message 6 days ago. A photograph of Wren walking down the steps of Riverside Elementary taken from across the street zoomed in close enough to see the unicorn stickers on her rain boots. On the back of the photograph, written in block letters, Monday. He had shown it to the marshals. They had increased patrols near the school. They had promised to have a car in the pickup line during dismissal. The car was not there on November 15th. Budget constraints, they would later say. Personnel reallocation, a miscommunication between departments. Bureaucratic language for the simple truth that Wren Coulter had fallen through the cracks of a system that was supposed to protect her. At 4:17 p.m., Boone's phone rang. It was the school. Not about Wren, about a budget meeting rescheduled for next week. A robocall. Automated. The kind of call that schools send to every parent on the contact list because someone in the front office clicked send all instead of selecting individual recipients. Boone ignored it. At 4:23, he called Wren's phone. It went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He called the school's main line. No answer. Friday afternoon. The office had closed at 4. At 4:31, he called Gravel. Luther Gravel Pennick was 61 years old. He had spent 23 years as a homicide detective with the Sacramento Police Department before retiring, or rather before the department suggested he retire after one too many disagreements with superiors about cases that were being closed too quickly and witnesses who were being ignored too easily. He had joined the Hells Angels not because he wanted to break laws, but because he was tired of watching the law break people. Now he served as the Sacramento chapter's unofficial counsel, the man you called when something went wrong and you needed someone who knew how both sides of the system worked. He was Boone's closest friend. He was Wren's godfather. And when his phone rang at 4:31 on a Friday afternoon and he saw Boone's name on the screen, something in his gut tightened. She is not answering her phone, Boone said. She probably left it in her backpack. She always answers on Fridays. Always. I told her I might be late today because of the prep session. She said she would wait on the steps and call me at 4. Gravel was already reaching for his jacket. I am going to the school, Boone said. Can you meet me there? I am already walking to my bike. It took Gravel 11 minutes to reach Riverside Elementary. He parked the Harley in the spot where Boone usually parked, the spot that was empty, the spot that had a crushed soda can and an oil stain and nothing else. The school was quiet. Dismissal was over. The sidewalks were empty. The crossing guard was gone. The teachers had retreated inside their duty done, their Friday begun. But someone was still there. Gravel saw him from 60 feet away. A boy, sitting on the curb across from the school entrance, head in his hands, body shaking, from cold, from adrenaline, from the weight of a failure he had not earned but carried anyway. Gravel had interviewed 1,000 witnesses in 23 years. He had learned to read body language the way most people read road signs. And this boy's body was telling him a story that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The shoulders were hunched forward, not in sullen defiance, but in the collapsed posture of someone carrying something too heavy. The shaking was not from cold alone. It was the tremor that comes after adrenaline, after action, after the moment when you have done everything you can and it was not enough. This kid found trouble, and he needs someone to believe him. He walked toward the boy, measured pace, slow. The way he had learned to approach frightened witnesses in his years as a detective. No sudden movements, no authority in his posture. Just presence, just availability. He stopped 10 feet away. The boy looked up. His face was wet, tears and snot and the raw redness that comes from crying so hard your skin burns. His eyes were brown dark, older than they should have been. 13 years old with 50-year-old eyes. The eyes of someone who had been watching the world from the outside for a very long time and had seen exactly how little the world cared about people like him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the boy said 5 words that would change everything. Please, nobody will listen. She screamed, Daddy. She needed her daddy. Gravel went completely still. His hands stopped mid-motion on the chrome of his motorcycle. His eyes locked onto the boy's face with an intensity that should have been terrifying but was not. For 3 seconds, measured in the boy's internal clock, the biker did not move, did not breathe, did not blink. He was reading, processing. The details of the boy's posture, voice expression. The specific way he said, she needed her daddy, with the emphasis on needed past tense, as if the kneading had happened and was now beyond his power to fix. The tears that were not performed but endured. Then Gravel walked forward. His boots were heavy on the wet asphalt. His knees cracked when he moved loud like dry branches snapping. He stopped 3 feet from the boy, and then he did something that broke every assumption Emmett Sykes had ever made about men who looked like this. He knelt, right there on the wet pavement in his leather vest, in his boots, in his gray braided beard, and every visual cue that said dangerous, formidable, not the kind of man who lowers himself for anyone. He got down on one knee so that he was looking up at Emmett instead of down. He made himself smaller. He made himself less. Son. His voice was low, steady, certain. The voice of a man who had spent decades sorting truth from lies and recognized truth when he heard it. Look at me. Emmett looked. I believe you. 3 words. 3 words that cracked something open in Emmett's chest. Something that had been sealed shut for 7 months of parking lots in hunger and invisibility. Something that had calcified under the weight of every adult who had looked at him today and seen nothing worth hearing. I believe you. Tell me everything. Emmett told him, not in fragments, not in the halting, uncertain way he had told the teachers. In complete sentences with complete details delivered with the precision of a mind that recorded everything and forgot nothing. White Dodge Ram ProMaster Van 2019 model, Virginia Plate 7, Romeo X-Ray 4138, Enterprise Rent-A-Car magnet on the driver's side door, but the magnet listed a Fairfax, Virginia location. The van circled the block once before parking at 3:52 p.m. My watch is broken, stopped at 3:47, but I know the gap. 5 minutes. Gravel did not interrupt, did not question, just listened. First kidnapper. 6'2", approximately 230, black leather jacket, stiff new, Timberland boots, size 13. I saw the print in the mud by the curb. Snake tattoo on the neck, black ink. The head reaches his jawline. Scar on the left cheek, approximately 4 inches. Looks like an old burn, not a cut. Southern accent, Georgia or Alabama. I could not narrow it further. Gravel's expression did not change, but his breathing did. Faster, harder, the controlled breathing of a man whose detective instincts were firing on every cylinder. Second kidnapper, 5'10", 175, bald shaved clean, navy blue windbreaker zipped to the neck, white Adidas sneakers, newer model minimal wear, missing his right pinky finger. I saw it when he grabbed her arm. He limps on his left leg, old ankle injury. It slows his gait, makes it uneven. When he shoved her into the van, he used his right arm more than his left, compensating for the leg. Syndicate profile, Gravel thought. Every detail matches the federal case files. This kid did not make this up. He cannot have made this up. She was wearing an oversized leather vest, Hell's Angels patch, pink rain boots with unicorn stickers, denim overalls underneath. She was carrying a crayon drawing. Flames on the wheels. It fell when they grabbed her. The van turned left at Folsom Boulevard. Emmett's voice cracked on the last word, not from exhaustion, from grief, from the crushing weight of having done everything right and still failing. I tried to tell them, the dismissal teacher, the principal. Nobody believed me. They said I was lying for attention. They said I was homeless, so I was making trouble. They told me to leave. Security escorted me off the property. His hands were shaking. His broken watch caught the fading afternoon light. I watched her get taken and I could not stop it. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Gravel put his hand on Emmett's shoulder, firm but gentle. An anchor. Emmett. The biker's voice was rock steady. What is your name? Emmett Sykes. Emmett, listen to me very carefully. He pulled out his phone. The screen lit up his face in the gathering dusk, and the lines around his eyes looked deeper than they had a minute ago, carved by something more urgent than age. You are not nobody. You are the only person who saw, the only person who remembered, the only person brave enough to keep trying when every adult in that building decided you were not worth hearing. He pressed a contact. 1 ring. 2. Ren Coulter is alive right now because you did not stop. A voice picked up on the other end. Yeah, Gunner, it is Gravel. I need every brother within 100 miles at the clubhouse. Now, a pause. What is going on? Ironside's little girl was snatched outside her school. I have an eyewitness. 13 years old, photographic memory, saw everything. White van Virginia plates syndicate profile on 2 kidnappers. They have got a 41-hour window before they move her. The pause lasted exactly 1 heartbeat. Gravel counted. Say no more. We are coming. The line went dead. 4 words. No questions about evidence. No concerns about legality. No hesitation. Just the sound of a brotherhood waking up, every gear engaging, every cylinder firing, the full machinery of loyalty and fury and family roaring to life. Because that is what family meant. Across the street, in the back seat of the Honda Accord, Nadine Sykes watched her son standing next to a man who looked like he could tear a phone book in half with his bare hands. She got out of the car, wrinkled waitress uniform, hair flat on one side. She walked across the street and said the only thing that mattered. What happened? Gravel explained. Kidnapping. Her son as the only witness. Information that could save a little girl's life. Nadine looked at Emmett. 7 months of sleeping in a car had taught them to communicate without words. A look, a nod. Where are you taking him? To our clubhouse. I was a homicide detective for 23 years. That little girl who was taken today is my goddaughter. His voice cracked on the last word. Nadine had spent 11 years listening to voices on emergency calls. She knew the difference between someone lying and someone breaking. This man was breaking. Go, she said to Emmett. I will follow in the car. Gravel rode carefully with Emmett, on the back arms wrapped around his waist. 20 minutes. They did not speak. Emmett's broken watch glinted under a streetlight. 3:47. Always 3:47. He checked it anyway. The ritual calmed him. 14 minutes into the ride, Gravel's phone buzzed. He pulled over. Boone just got to the school, he told Emmett. She is not there. Nobody can tell him where she went. The office is closed. The teachers are gone. He is losing his mind. Gravel typed a reply with thick fingers that moved faster than they should have been able to on a small screen. Brother, I have her trail. Eyewitness. Come to the clubhouse. Do not call the cops yet. I will explain everything. The reply came in 2 seconds. If she is hurt, I will burn this city to the ground. Gravel pocketed the phone and pulled back onto the road. He did not tell Emmett what Boone had written. He did not need to. The boy had read the screen over his shoulder. And in the orange glow of the streetlight, Gravel saw something shift in the boy's expression. Not fear, not guilt. Something harder than both. Resolve. The kind of resolve that has no business living in the eyes of a 13-year-old boy. The kind that only grows in soil that has been scorched bare. Emmett tightened his grip on Gravel's waist, and they rode on. But inside the van that was now 11 miles ahead of them, somewhere in the industrial sprawl south of Sacramento, Wren Coulter was doing exactly what her father had taught her to do. She was surviving. The room they put her in had no windows. The floor was bare concrete, cold enough to feel through her rain boots. The walls were cinder block, painted a green that had faded to the color of old moss. A single camping lantern sat in the corner, casting a yellow light that made everything look like it was underwater. They had tied her wrists in front of her, not behind. A mistake. The rope was coarse, the kind used for tying down cargo, and it bit into her skin every time she moved, leaving raw red lines that stung like paper cuts dipped in lemon juice. Her right arm throbbed where the tall one had grabbed her. The bruise was already darkening, spreading beneath the surface like ink in water. Her lip tasted like rust from where she had bitten the bald one. She had bitten him hard enough to draw blood, hard enough that he had cursed and shoved her into this room and slammed the door behind him. She could hear them on the other side, talking, low voices muffled by the cinder block. She could not make out the words yet, but she was listening. Coulter's don't break. Wren whispered it to herself, the way a prayer is whispered, the way a promise is whispered, not for anyone else to hear, just for herself, to remind herself that she was still here, still breathing, still Wren Coulter, 8 years old, daughter of Boone Ironside Coulter, and that somewhere out there her daddy was coming. She began to recite her address. 1462 Ardon Way, 1462 Ardon Way, 1462 Ardan Way. She said it quietly, rhythmically matching the words to the squeak of her boot against the concrete floor. One squeak per syllable, a metronome of survival. Her father had taught her this when she was 5. If you ever get lost, little bird, you say your address until someone safe finds you. Over and over. Do not stop. Do not forget. That address is your way home. Wren did not stop. She said it 50 times. 100. She lost count because counting the words mattered less than saying them. The act of speaking her address was an act of defiance. It was her way of telling the darkness and the cold and the rope and the men on the other side of the door that she was not theirs. She belonged to 1462 Ardon Way. She belonged to her daddy. She belonged to herself. Outside the door, the voices got louder for a moment. She said the old man is supposed to testify Monday. That was the driver, the one with the snake on his neck. His voice was deeper than the other ones, steadier, the voice of a man who had done things like this before and had learned to be calm while doing them. We hold her until Sunday night. If he recants, we drop her somewhere public. Bus station, gas station, somewhere with cameras. And if he does not recant, the bald one. Higher voice, nervous. She could hear it in the way his words came too fast, like they were tripping over each other to get out of his mouth. Then we get a different call. Silence. Wren did not understand all of it. She did not know what recant meant. But she understood the tone. She understood the word Monday. She understood that her daddy was supposed to do something, and these men were trying to stop him. And she understood the silence after a different call. Even at 8 years old, she understood what that silence meant. Her boots squeaked against the floor. She pressed her back harder against the wall. She clutched the vest tighter. Coulters don't break. And while she whispered her fingers were working, she remembered something her father had told her once. A trick. He had been showing her how to tie knots for a school project, and she had asked him why some knots were harder to undo than others. Because the person who tied them did it when the rope was tight, he had said. If you tighten your muscles when someone ties you, then relax them after the rope gets looser. That is how Houdini escaped. Wren had no idea who Houdini was, but she trusted her daddy. So when the bald man had tied her wrists, she had done the only thing she could think of. She had made fists. She had squeezed her hands as tight as she could, flexing every muscle in her small forearm, making her wrists as wide as an 8-year-old could make them. And now in the dark, she relaxed. The rope shifted. Not much, a fraction of an inch, but enough to give her hope, enough to give her room to work. She twisted her right hand, slowly, back and forth. The rope burned, but she did not cry. She twisted and pulled and twisted again, and with each small movement, the gap between her skin and the rope grew wider. She could not get free. Not yet. But she could get one hand loose enough to reach the pocket of her overalls. Inside that pocket, forgotten until now, was a crayon. Red. The same red she had used to draw the flames on her daddy's motorcycle wheels. Wren pulled the crayon out with her freed fingers. She looked around the room, at the walls, at the floor, at the air vent near the ceiling, a metal grate about 12 inches square, the kind that connected to ductwork that ran through the building. She stood up. Her boots squeaked against the floor. She reached up, stretching on her tiptoes, and she wrote on the inside of the vent grate in letters as large as the space would allow. Help W, 2 words, 5 letters, red crayon on gray metal. It was not much. It might never be found. But it was something. It was an act. It was Wren Coulter, 8 years old, refusing to be nothing more than a body in a room. She thought about her drawing, the one that fell on the wet sidewalk, Daddy on his motorcycle, the flames on the wheels. She had worked on those flames for 20 minutes during free period, layering red over orange over yellow, until they looked real, until they looked alive, until Mrs. Henley had said, "That is beautiful, Wren," and she had felt the warmth of praise spread through her chest like sunshine. The drawing was gone now, dissolving in the rain on a sidewalk where nobody had stopped to pick it up. But she could draw another one. She would draw another one. When she got home, when Daddy came, she would draw him 100 motorcycles with 1,000 flames, and she would never let any of them go. She put the crayon back in her pocket. She worked her hand back into the rope, carefully winding it back through the loops, positioning her wrists so that the raw red lines aligned with the rope's edges, so that when they checked on her, everything would look exactly the same, exactly like a helpless 8-year-old who had given up. Then she sat back down on the mattress. She pulled her daddy's vest tighter around her shoulders. She breathed in the smell of motor oil and coffee and highway wind, and she started again. 1462 Ardon Way. 1462 Ardon Way. 1462 Ardan Way. Squeak, squeak, squeak. In the parking lot of the Hells Angels Clubhouse on Stockton Boulevard, the first motorcycle had already arrived. Then the second, then the third, chrome catching the glow of the streetlights, engines cutting to silence one by one. Men in leather vests stepping off their bikes and walking through a reinforced steel door without asking a single question. They had received the call. Ironside's little girl was gone. And they were coming. Every last one of them. Coulter's Don't Break. The Hells Angels Clubhouse at 4200 Stockton Boulevard was not what Emmett expected. He had imagined something from a movie. Dark, dangerous. The kind of place where violence hung in the air like cigarette smoke, and every surface was stained with something you did not want to identify. Instead, he found a building. Squat. Functional. Reinforced steel door, yes. Windows you could not see through, yes. But inside the fluorescent lights buzzed the same way they buzzed in every community center and VFW hall and church basement he had ever slept in during the worst months of homelessness. There was a pool table in the center of the main room, the felt worn thin in spots. A bar along one wall, the kind that had been built by hand and showed it. Photographs on the walls, not mugshots. Barbecues, group rides, a framed picture of a man holding a newborn baby, the baby so small it fit in one palm. By 5:30, the parking lot was full. 97 motorcycles. Chrome catching the last light of a November day that had already taken too much. Arranged in rows with a precision that spoke of discipline, of men who understood that order was not the enemy of freedom, but its foundation. Emmett stood near the door and watched them arrive. They came from Sacramento and Oakland and San Jose, from Fresno and Stockton, and places whose names he did not catch because the conversations happened too fast and too low. They came on Harleys and Indians and a few bikes Emmett could not identify, machines that rumbled like the earth clearing its throat. They did not all look the same. Some were old, gray beards and weathered hands, and the slow, deliberate movements of men who had survived enough years to know that speed was overrated. Some were young, sharp-eyed, and restless, phones already out, fingers already moving across screens. Some looked like construction workers. Some like mechanics. One man wore wire-rimmed glasses and carried a leather briefcase along with his riding gloves, and Emmett would later learn that his name was Warren Professor Aldridge, and he held a master's degree in counseling psychology. But every single one of them wore the same patch, and every single one of them had answered the same call. Ironside's little girl was gone. They did not need to know more than that. At the head of the room, standing in front of the pool table with a map of Sacramento spread across the felt like a battle plan, stood Boone Coulter. Emmett had not met him before this moment, but he recognized him instantly. Not because of any physical resemblance to Wren, because of the eyes. Boone Coulter's eyes were hazel, the exact same shade as the little girl's. But where Wren's eyes had been wide with terror in the moment before the van door closed, Boone's were narrow, focused. The kind of focus that comes not from calm, but from the deliberate suppression of something volcanic. He was 41 years old, built like a man who had spent his life doing physical work thick through the chest and shoulders, arms that filled his sleeves without trying. His head was shaved close and a scar ran along his left forearm from a motorcycle accident 12 years ago that had nearly taken the arm with it. His hands kept clenching into fists he could not seem to control. Gravel brought Emmett forward. The room, which had been humming with low conversation and the scrape of boots on concrete and the particular electric tension of men waiting for direction, went silent. 97 pairs of eyes turned toward a 13-year-old boy in a gray hoodie with a hole in the elbow and sneakers held together with duct tape. "Tell them what you told me," Gravel said. Emmett had never had 97 people look at him in his life. Not at school before he stopped going. Not in the parking lots where he and his mother slept. Not anywhere ever had this many adults focus their full attention on him and waited for him to speak. For a moment, his throat closed. The fear was physical, a fist around his windpipe squeezing. The fear of judgment, of disbelief, of the same dismissal he had received from every adult at Riverside Elementary. The fear that these men too would look at him and see a homeless kid telling stories for attention. Then he looked at Boone, at the hazel eyes rimmed with red, at the fists that kept clenching, at the leather vest with the same patch that Wren wore every Friday the patch that smelled like motor oil and coffee and highway wind, at the terror in a father's eyes. And Emmett told them everything. The van, the plates, the physical descriptions, the timeline, the direction they turned, the mud print from the Timberland boot, the missing pinky finger, the limp, the Enterprise magnet from the wrong state. The way the driver checked his phone twice while circling the block like a man looking at a photograph of someone he had never seen before. Every detail his memory had captured, laid out like evidence on an invisible table. When he finished, the room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight to it that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Then a man in the back spoke. That is a photographic memory. Harlan Preacher Voss was 67 years old, a founding member of the Sacramento chapter. His face looked like it had been carved from old wood. Every line earned every crease a story. His gray beard reached the middle of his chest, and when he spoke, the room listened the way rooms listen to thunder. I have seen it twice in my life. The kid is not making it up. He cannot make that up. No one coaches a witness to include boot prints and pinky fingers and rental car magnets from the wrong state. That is the real thing. Another man stepped forward. Declan Bite Pryor, 31, heavy-set pale complexion, the soft hands and screen-bright eyes of someone who lived more in the digital world than the physical one. He had been a systems analyst for a defense contractor before a disagreement over ethics led to a termination that led to a year of unemployment, that led to a motorcycle, that led to a patch. If the van is an enterprise rental, he said their fleet has GPS tracking. Transponder pings every 15 minutes. The data goes through their fleet management system, which routes through their insurance provider. I can get access. Might take a few hours, but I can find it. Do it. Boone's voice was gravel scraping against stone. A third man, Raymond Doc Kessler, 63, gray ponytail. Tattoo of a caduceus on his forearm, the twin snakes wrapped around the staff of medicine, the mark of a man who had spent 20 years as a combat medic before trading a uniform for a vest. His hands were steady, the way a surgeon's hands are steady, not because they never shook, but because he had trained them not to. If she has been held without food or water for more than 24 hours, we are looking at dehydration. A child her size, 50 pounds, maybe 51, the kidneys start showing stress within 18 hours. After 36, we are talking potential organ damage. When we find her, I need to assess her immediately. IV fluids, if I can get a line. Oral rehydration, if I cannot. A fourth man, Warren Professor Aldridge, 47, clean-shaven, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The briefcase he had carried in contained not legal documents, but clinical assessment tools, the instruments of a man who spent his professional life helping children put broken things back together. And after he said, when we get her back, she is going to need someone who knows how to talk to a child who has been through this. I have credentials. I have experience. I will be there when she wakes up. Boone looked around the room, at the brothers who had dropped everything, at the specialists already forming a rescue plan without being asked, at the homeless boy who had given them the only lead they had. 41 hours, Boone said. That is what we have before they move her, before the trial on Monday, before I am supposed to stand in a courtroom and testify against the man who ordered this. He paused. His jaw tightened so hard Emmett could see the muscles flex beneath the skin. Money will not get my daughter back. Lawyers will not get her back. The cops did not even know she was missing until I called them myself, and they told me to wait 48 hours before filing a report. The room growled, low, dangerous. The sound of 97 men who had just been told that the system they already distrusted had failed a child in the most fundamental way possible. 48 hours. Boone repeated it like a curse. My little girl is out there tied up, scared, alone, and they told me to wait 48 hours. The growl deepened. But we are not waiting. Boone straightened, his fists unclenched. His eyes swept the room. Gravel is running point. Bite is tracing the van. Doc is prepping a med kit. Professor is on standby for Ren. And every other brother here you are spreading across this city, door to door if we have to. Gas stations, motels, truck stops, rest areas. Someone saw that van. Someone knows where they took her. He looked at Emmett. And this kid who everyone dismissed, He is going to help us find my daughter. Emmett's chest tightened. You do not have to, Boone said. His voice softened for the first time. You have already done more than anyone. I want to help. Emmett's voice was small but certain. I remember everything. Maybe I will see something else. Maybe I will remember something that matters. Boone stepped forward. He was a foot taller than Emmett and twice his weight, covered in tattoos and leather, and every visual cue that said this man could break you without trying. But when he knelt, when he got down on one knee the way Gravel had done on the sidewalk an hour ago, his expression held nothing but gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing her, for not stopping. Emmett did not know what to say, so he just nodded, and the hunt began. By midnight, 97 motorcycles had crisscrossed Sacramento like a web spun by something angry and purposeful. Gravel coordinated from the clubhouse. The map on the pool table had become a living document, red pins marking every reported sighting, blue pins for dead ends, yellow for places that needed a second look. His detective training had kicked in fully now, the rusty machinery of investigation oiled by urgency and running smooth. Methodical, precise, patient. While every other instinct in his body screamed to tear the city apart with his bare hands. Emmett sat beside him. The boy had not slept, had not eaten, though Doc had tried to push a sandwich into his hands twice and a bottle of water 3 times. He stared at the map with eyes that seemed to be looking not at it, but through it into some internal projection, where the events of the afternoon replayed in perfect clarity, searchable, zoomable, an infinite recording that he scrubbed through again and again, looking for the frame he had missed. The van turned left at Folsom, Emmett said, for the 5th time. Left, toward the industrial district. The police are searching the east side of the city, but they went left. Gravel nodded. Byte is working on the GPS. Enterprise systems are locked down tight, military-grade encryption on the fleet data. But he found a back door through their insurance provider's actuarial database. Another hour, maybe 2. She does not have hours. Gravel looked at the boy, at the desperation in his voice, at the way his broken watch kept catching the fluorescent light every time he checked it, a compulsion he could not control, a ritual that tethered him to something stable in a world that had come unmoored. She is alive, Gravel said. His voice was steady, professional, the voice of a man who had said these words to frighten families more times than he could count, and had learned to make them sound true even when he was not sure they were. They do not want her dead. They want her as leverage. As long as Boone's testimony is hanging over that trial, they need her breathing. And if he does not testify, then they will promise to release her. That is what they will say. That is always what they say. But they will not. Gravel's jaw tightened. Men like these do not leave witnesses, even 8-year-old witnesses. A cold silence settled between them. That is why we find her before Monday, Gravel said. That is why we do not leave this to the police. They will follow protocol. Protocol means a command post and a negotiation team and a public information officer and 6 hours of phone calls while a little girl sits in the dark wondering if her daddy forgot her. His voice dropped. We do not negotiate. We extract. He turned to Emmett. You said the bald one limps on his left leg. Anything else about their movement, weaknesses, habits? Emmett closed his eyes. In his mind, he was back on that curb. The wet sidewalk, the gray sky, the white vans circling the block. Everything in perfect focus, every frame preserved. The driver, the one with the snake tattoo. He is the muscle. He moved fast, confident, trained, military background maybe. The way he scanned the crowd before approaching Wren was systematic. Left to right, then right to left. He did not check behind him once, confident that the bald one had his back. Gravel nodded slowly. The bald one is the weak link, slower. When he shoved Wren into the van, he favored his right side. The left leg is compromised. If you take him first, the driver is alone. Fast, but alone. And then Emmett said something that changed the direction of the search. There is something else. He opened his eyes. When they circled the block before parking, the driver checked his phone twice. But there was also a piece of paper on the dashboard. White. Printed. It looked like directions, not a phone map. Printed directions, the kind you get from a hotel business center. Gravel leaned forward, and when they grabbed her, the driver said her name. Wren Coulter. He said it like he was reading it, like he was confirming it. Not like someone who knew her, like someone who had been given a name and a photograph and a location. They were sent, Gravel said. Hired. Emmett's voice was flat. Contract job, which means there is a third person. Someone who gave them the information. Someone who knew what Wren looked like. What time she got out of school. Which exit she used. Every man within earshot went still. Gravel's mind was already working. Printed directions meant a hotel. A hotel meant a check-in record. And the fact that the kidnappers had needed a photograph of Wren meant they had never seen her before, which meant someone local had provided it. Someone with access to the school, access to dismissal schedules, access to student records. Someone inside. He filed that away, a problem for later. Right now, the priority was the van. The van was the thread, and if they pulled it hard enough, it would lead them to Wren. Find out who Boone said from across the room. He had been listening. His voice was ice on steel. But first we bring my daughter home. At 1:14 in the morning, Bite hit a wall. The insurance provider's database gave him the van's GPS history for the past 72 hours. Pick up at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Fairfax, Virginia, 5 days ago. Interstate 81 south to Interstate 40 west. A straight shot across the country. Memphis, Oklahoma City, Amarillo, Albuquerque, Flagstaff, Sacramento. 2,700 miles in 4 days. 2 drivers switching off. Professional, focused. No stops longer than 30 minutes except for a 6-hour gap in Amarillo that matched a motel parking lot on the edge of town. But the last GPS ping showed the van at an address in South Sacramento, a commercial warehouse, former recording studio, abandoned 2 years ago after the owner declared bankruptcy. Got it. Bite's voice cut through the clubhouse at 1:17. Enterprise GPS pings every 15 minutes. Last 3 pings, same location. 1847 Industrial Parkway, commercial warehouse. Been sitting there since 4:30 this afternoon. Boone was on his feet. How far? 12 minutes by bike. Then we go now. Wait. Gravel held up his hand. His detective's instinct was louder than the urgency in his chest. We do not go in blind. He turned to Bite. Can you pull up the building specs, county records, blueprints? Anything Bite's fingers were already flying. County Assessor's Office has it listed as a 2-story commercial structure. 32,000 square feet, 3 exits. Main entrance on the south side, service door on the east, loading dock on the north. No active utilities. Power was cut 8 months ago. But someone has been there, Emmett said quietly. They would need light, a camping lantern or a generator. And heat. It is November. Wherever they are keeping her, they have some kind of setup. Gravel looked at the boy with an expression that was hard to read. Respect maybe, or recognition. The look of a man who saw in this 13-year-old the ghost of the detective he had been at 30. Doc, Gravel turned to the combat medic. Medical situation, 34 hours without food or water. 8-year-old girl, 51 pounds. Doc Kessler stepped forward. His face was clinical, controlled. The face of a man who had assessed worse and worse places. Dehydration is the primary concern. A child that size with no fluid intake for over a day, she will be weak, disoriented, possible early signs of kidney stress, dry mouth, sunken eyes, rapid pulse. If we find her conscious, I need to get fluids into her within the hour. IV, if I can get a line in. Oral rehydration if her veins are too collapsed. What about injuries, restraint wounds? Depends on how tight they tied her. Rope. On a child's skin for that long, you are looking at abrasion at minimum. Possible nerve damage if the circulation was cut. We'll not know the extent until I see her. And if they hurt her beyond the restraints. Doc's clinical mask cracked. Just for a moment. The first fracture in the professional detachment he had maintained since he walked through the clubhouse door. Brother, I patched up soldiers in places I am not allowed to name. Whatever they did, I can stabilize her. I can keep her alive. But we need to get to her first. Gravel nodded. He turned to the room. Gunner, 2 teams. Perimeter and entry. 10 brothers on every exit. Nobody goes in until we know the layout. Nobody comes out unless we say so. A man named Tank stepped forward. 6'4", 280, 4 arms like bridge cables. The kind of man whose physical presence changed the temperature of a room. He had been a bouncer for 11 years before finding a brotherhood that valued his size for something more meaningful than keeping drunks out of bars. I want the east door, Tank said. Service entrance. That is where they will run. Gravel nodded. What about the police? Someone asked from the back of the room. We call them when she is safe. Gravel scanned the faces in front of him. Right now, calling the police means a perimeter, a negotiation team, a hostage specialist reading from a manual. 6 hours of procedure while an 8-year-old girl sits in the dark. He paused. We do not do procedure. We do family. The room moved. But before they moved, something happened that no one expected. Bite looked up from his laptop. His face had changed. The color had drained out of it, leaving him the color of old paper. Gravel. His voice was wrong. Too flat, too controlled. The GPS. It just updated. And the van is not at 1847 Industrial Parkway anymore. The room stopped. It moved. 23 minutes ago. The latest ping puts it at a different address. 6 miles further south, another warehouse. Emmett felt the floor tilt beneath him. Not physically, but the certainty he had built, the conviction that they were close, that the trail was solid, that this was almost over, shifted like sand under a wave. They moved her, Boone said. His voice was a controlled explosion. They knew. Someone told them we were looking. Gravel's mind was racing. The GPS pings every 15 minutes. If the van moved 23 minutes ago, they had a head start, but not a big one. And moving a child in the middle of the night meant risk, meant exposure, meant the possibility of being seen. Unless someone had warned them. The inside man, Gravel said. Whoever fed them Wren's schedule, her photo, her exit. That person is still connected to them. And they know we are looking. Hal Boone's fists were clenching again. How do they know? Because somebody at that school made a phone call, Emmett said. Every head turned. The boy's face was pale, but his voice was steady. When I told Dr. Whitfield what happened, she did not call the police. She did not check the cameras. She called security to remove me. But what if she also called someone else not to report the kidnapping? To report that someone had witnessed it? The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a room. Gravel spoke first. That is a theory, a good one. But right now it does not matter who tipped them off. What matters is the new location. Bite, where is the van now? Bite checked his screen. 2914 Depot Road South. Another commercial property, former trucking dispatch center. Larger than the first location. 4 stories, multiple access points. They are upgrading, Gravel said, moving to a more defensible position. That means they are expecting trouble. Or they are preparing to move her out of the city entirely. Doc added quietly. The words hung in the air like a blade. Boone turned to Emmett. Kid, I need you to think. When that van circled the block, when those men parked, when they grabbed my daughter, is there anything at all that tells us what they are planning next? Emmett closed his eyes. The recording in his mind played again. The van circling, the driver checking his phone, the printed directions on the dashboard, the way the bald one had moved, rushed nervous a man on a schedule, the way the driver had scanned the crowd, systematic, trained a man following a plan, and then Emmett heard it. Not in the present, in the memory. A sound he had registered at the time but had not processed. A sound that had been filed away in the vast library of his mind, waiting for the moment when it would matter. A train horn. When the van turned left at Folsom and accelerated, there had been a train horn, distant but distinct. The long, low blast of a freight train approaching a crossing. And beneath the horn, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on track. Close, within a mile. The rail yard, Emmett said. His eyes snapped open. When the van turned left at Folsom, I heard a train. Not a commuter train. Freight. Heavy. The horn pattern was long, short, long. That is a grade crossing warning. The Sacramento rail yard is south of Folsom Boulevard, and it connects to the freight corridor that runs through the industrial district. He looked at Gravel. Both locations, the first warehouse and this new one, they are near the rail lines. That is not a coincidence. They picked locations near the rail yard because freight trains provide noise cover, and because the rail yard has connections that go south, to Los Angeles, to the border. If they are planning to move her out of the city, they will not use the highway. Too many cameras, too many patrol cars. They will use the freight corridor. Gravel stared at the boy for 3 full seconds. Then he turned to bite. Pull up every property within half a mile of the Sacramento Freight Rail corridor south of Folsom. Commercial, industrial, abandoned. I want addresses, owners, and utility records. On it, Gravel turned to Boone. We hit the new location, but we go smart, not fast. If they move once, they can move again. We need to box them in. How brothers on the rail corridor. Every crossing, every access road, every point where a vehicle could enter or exit the rail yard. If they try to move her again, they run into us. Boone nodded. His jaw was set like concrete. And the insider at the school after. Gravel's voice was granite. We deal with that after Wren is home. At 2:19 in the morning, 97 motorcycles rolled out of the Stockton Boulevard clubhouse. But they did not all go to the same place. 20 brothers formed the strike team. 10 for the perimeter of 2914 Depot Road South. 10 for the entry. They would be the ones to breach the building and extract Wren. 30 brothers spread along the freight rail corridor covering every crossing and access point between the industrial district and the southern city limits. If the van tried to run, it would hit a wall of chrome and leather. The remaining 47 continued the door-to-door canvass. Gas stations, motels, 24-hour diners. Any place where a white van with Virginia plates might have stopped for fuel or food or a moment of carelessness, and they found something. At a 24-hour Shell station on Freeport Boulevard, a brother named Mac showed the attendant a photograph of the van. The attendant, a 19-year-old kid named Jordan with acne scars and headphones around his neck, nodded immediately. Yeah, that van was here. Around 8:30, maybe 9. Two guys, one of them bought 3 bottles of water and a bag of chips and a box of granola bars. The bald one, he paid cash. Mac relayed the information to Gravel. Granola bars and water, Gravel said. They are keeping her alive. That is consistent with the leverage play. They need her breathing. It was a small confirmation, a thin thread of evidence that said Wren Coulter was still alive as of 9 o'clock that evening. But in the darkness of a hunt, where certainty was the rarest commodity, even a thin thread mattered. Another brother riding the corridor near the rail yard reported something different. A man walking along the tracks at 1:45 in the morning. On foot, nervous, looking over his shoulder every few steps. Average build, baseball cap pulled low. The brother followed at a distance. The man walked half a mile along the tracks, then turned into a fenced lot adjacent to 2914 Depot Road South. He entered through a gap in the chain link and disappeared into the building through a ground floor window that had been pried open from the inside. A third man. Gravel processed this. 3 hostiles, now not 2. The plan needed adjustment. He briefed the entry team quietly in the shadow of a closed auto parts store 2 blocks from the target building. Third man entered the building on foot from the rail side. Average build, baseball cap, did not arrive by vehicle. That means he is local. That means he is the contact, the inside man. Every face in the circle hardened. We clear the building room by room. Gravel continued. Ground floor first. If the third man is downstairs, we neutralize him quietly before moving to the second floor. We do not want him alerting the other 2. Boone spoke. And if we cannot do it quietly, then we do it loud and fast. But loud means Wren hears a fight before she sees her father, and I do not want that for her. Quiet is better. Quiet means the first thing she hears is your voice. Boone nodded. Something in his expression shifted. The rage was still there, deep and hot, but it was covered now by something more precise. The understanding that how they did this mattered as much as whether they did it. That Wren would remember these moments for the rest of her life, and the difference between a rescue and a raid was the difference between a memory of salvation and a memory of more violence. Quiet, Boone said. For Wren. Emmett rode on the back of Gravel's Harley. His arms were wrapped around the old detective's waist, his face pressed into the leather, the wind slapping against his exposed skin with a cold that went deeper than November. He was not afraid. That surprised him. Somewhere between the clubhouse and the road, the fear had burned away, replaced by something harder and more useful. Purpose, direction, the feeling of moving towards something instead of away from everything. He thought about Wren, about the way she had said, "I don't know you" to a man twice her size, the way she had tried to run, the way she had bitten the bald one hard enough to draw blood. 8 years old and she had fought. She had fought the way her father would have fought, with everything she had and nothing held back. Hold on, kid. Gravel's voice cut through the wind. We are close. And inside the building at 2914 Depot Road South on the second floor, in a room that smelled like diesel and old paper, Wren Coulter was counting. Not her address this time, not squeaks. She was counting footsteps. The men checked on her every 45 minutes. She had timed it by counting slowly to 2,700, which was 45 minutes if you counted one number per second, which was not perfectly accurate, but was close enough for an 8-year-old who did not have a watch. She had counted 3 cycles since they moved her. The move had been sudden. The bald one had come into the room, untied her feet, but not her hands, thrown a blanket over her head, and carried her downstairs and across a parking lot and into the van. The van had driven for what felt like forever, but was probably 11 minutes based on her count. Then another building, another room. This one was bigger than the first. Higher ceiling. The air vent was too high to reach. But the rope on her wrists was the same rope retied by the same man, and Wren had done the same thing she had done before. She had made fists. And now, 45 minutes into the third cycle, she had one hand free again. The crayon was still in her pocket. But this time she did not write on a vent. This time she had a different idea. The floor of this room was dusty, thick dust, the kind that accumulates over months of emptiness. And when the men opened the door to check on her, they always looked at her first, at her face, at her hands. They did not look at the floor. Wren slid off the mattress. She knelt on the concrete, and with the red crayon in letters as large as her arm could reach, she wrote on the floor behind the mattress in the shadow where the camping lantern's light did not reach. Wren Coulter, 1462, Ardan Way Daddy Help. She wrote it the way her father had taught her to recite it. Name, address, a call for help, a message in a bottle thrown into the darkest ocean she had ever known. Then she climbed back onto the mattress. She worked her hand back into the rope. She pulled the vest tight around her shoulders, and she waited. Because Coulters don't break. She thought about her daddy, about the way he called her little bird, about the way he tucked her in at night and told her stories about the road, about the brothers, about the places he had seen from the back of a Harley. She thought about Uncle Gravel and Doc and Preacher. They were her family, not by blood, by something stronger than blood, by choice, by showing up. And they were coming. She knew it the way she knew the sun would come up in the morning. The way she knew her daddy loved her more than anything in the world. Something was coming. Something with the weight and fury of 97 engines and one father's love. And it was almost here. The strike team reached 2914 Depot Road South at 2:31 in the morning. The building was larger than the first location. 4 stories of corrugated steel and concrete block a former trucking dispatch center that had been abandoned when the company relocated to Reno 3 years ago. The parking lot was cracked and weedy, the fence around it bent in several places where someone had cut the chain link. One vehicle in the lot, white van, Virginia plates. It is them, Gravel said into his Bluetooth headset. His voice was barely above a whisper. Perimeter team position on all exits. Entry team east side service door, same as the briefing. Nobody moves until I give the word. 10 shadows peeled away from the group and disappeared into the darkness with the precision of men who had spent years riding in formation. 2 minutes passed. All exits covered came the voice through the headset. North door covered, south entrance covered, loading dock covered. No movement, no lights visible. One vehicle in lot confirmed. White Dodge ProMaster Virginia tags. Gravel turned to Boone. The father's face was carved from granite. Every line deepened by 34 hours of fear and fury and the specific kind of helplessness that comes from knowing your child is in danger and being unable to reach her. Your call, Brother Gravel said. You want in on the breach. Boone did not answer with words. He answered by stepping forward, toward the building, toward his daughter. Try to stop me. They entered through the service door on the east side. Tank went first. The lock was a commercial deadbolt heavy-duty, the kind designed to resist forced entry. It resisted for approximately 4 seconds. Tank placed the crowbar against the frame, set his 280 pounds behind it, and pushed. The metal screamed once, then silence. Inside darkness. Total. The kind of darkness that has texture that presses against your eyes like velvet. Gravel pulled a tactical flashlight from his vest. The beam cut through the black, sweeping across a concrete floor covered in dust and debris. Old filing cabinets lined one wall. Stacked pallets in a corner. The smell of mold and rust, and beneath it faint but unmistakable the smell of burnt food. Someone had been cooking here. Recently. They are using this place, Gravel murmured. Entry team, ground floor. Clear it. Slow and quiet. They moved through the building like ghosts. Emmett stayed behind Gravel, his duct-taped sneakers making barely a whisper against the concrete. His heart hammered, his hands were steady, his eyes were wide, adjusted to the darkness, seeing shapes and outlines and the suggestion of structure in the black. Ground floor clear, came the report. 2 rooms, both empty, evidence of recent habitation in the south room. Food wrappers, water bottles, a camping stove. No hostiles. Stairs, Gravel said. Second and floor. And then Emmett heard it. Squeak, faint, distant, coming from above. The unmistakable sound of rubber against concrete. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Faster now, frantic. The rhythm of someone pacing, someone small. Gravel. Emmett grabbed the biker's arm. His voice was barely a breath. I hear her. Second floor. That is her rain boot. It squeaks when she walks. I heard the same sound when she was coming down the school steps. Gravel did not question, did not hesitate. He clicked his headset. Second floor. Go. The stairs groaned under their weight. Emmett counted. 15 steps to the first landing. A turn. 12 more to the second floor. The air grew warmer as they climbed, heated by something, a space heater or a generator, and the smell of food was stronger here. At the top, a hallway stretched into darkness. 3 doors on the left, 2 on the right. One at the end, slightly ajar. Light bleeding through the crack. Yellow light, the warm glow of a camping lantern. And then voices, low, male. I said we wait until Sunday. We wait until Sunday. She keeps crying, keeps making noise. What if someone hears, it is an abandoned building? Who is going to hear relax? Gravel held up a fist. Stop. He pressed his ear to the door. Listened. Counted the voices. 2. Only 2. He held up 2 fingers toward Boone. 2 hostiles. Boone nodded. His body had gone completely still. The trembling, the clenching fists, the restless energy of 34 hours of helplessness. All of it gone. Replaced by something focused and final. The third man, Emmett whispered. The one who came in from the rail side. Where is he? Ground floor was clear. Gravel murmured. Which means he is either up here with them or on another floor. As if in answer, a sound came from behind them. Down the hall, a door creaking. Footsteps on concrete. Slow shuffling the gait of a man trying to move quietly and not quite succeeding. Tank moved without a word. He stepped back into the shadows of the stairwell, pressed himself against the wall, and waited. The footsteps grew closer. A shape appeared at the end of the hallway. Average build, baseball cap, carrying a paper bag that smelled like fast food. The third man, he never saw Tank. One moment he was walking. The next 280 pounds of silence and purpose had him pinned against the wall with a hand over his mouth and an arm across his chest that might as well have been a steel beam. The paper bag hit the floor. A hamburger rolled out, fries scattered across the concrete like pale greasy confetti. The man's eyes went wide. He tried to struggle. It lasted about 2 seconds. Tank applied pressure. Not enough to hurt, just enough to communicate that struggling was a choice with no positive outcomes. Gravel appeared in front of him, held a finger to his lips. The man went limp. 2 zip ties later, he was sitting against the wall with his hands behind his back and a strip of duct tape across his mouth. His baseball cap had fallen off, revealing a face that was young, mid-20s, unremarkable, the kind of face you would not remember if you passed it on the street. But Emmett would remember it. Emmett remembered every face. Gravel crouched in front of the man, pulled the tape away from his mouth just enough for a whisper. How many others, too? The man's voice was a terrified breath. Just the 2 upstairs. I swear, I am just the go-between. I bring food, that is all I do. I did not touch the girl. Gravel replaced the tape. He turned to the entry team. 2 hostiles behind that door. 1 child. We go now. He pointed at Tank, then at the door. What happened next took 8 seconds. Tank hit the door with his shoulder, and the frame exploded inward, the deadbolt tearing free from the wood like a tooth pulled from a jaw. Splinters flying, the sound sharp enough to split the silence into before and after. Boone was through before the door finished swinging. He moved with a speed that should have been impossible for a man his size, a 220-pound freight train of leather and fury, and 34 hours of compressed terror finally detonating into motion. His boots hit the concrete, and he was across the threshold in a single stride, eyes sweeping the room, processing everything in the fraction of a second that separated a father from his daughter. Gravel followed half a heartbeat behind. His tactical flashlight swept left, right, center, painting the room in harsh white light. The camping lantern sat on an overturned crate in the corner, its yellow glow suddenly inadequate against the flashlight's beam. A folding table, two chairs, water bottles, a portable radio tuned to static. The detritus of men who had been waiting for something and were not prepared for what arrived instead. Dominic Ferris, the one with the snake crawling up his neck, was rising from a chair. His right hand was reaching for something on the table. A phone, not a weapon. The instinct of a man whose first thought was to call for instructions not to fight. He never reached it. Boone hit him at full speed. The chair went sideways. The table flipped. Water bottles scattered across the floor like bowling pins. Ferris went down hard, his back slamming against the concrete with a sound that emptied the air from his lungs in a single grunt. Boone's knee found the center of his spine. His hand found the man's right arm and wrenched it behind his back at an angle that produced a sound like a wet branch bending past its breaking point. Ferris screamed. On the other side of the room, Tank was already on Clint Houseman. The bald man had been standing near the door to the inner room when the breach happened. He had turned. He had seen Tank. And for one brief crystalline moment, the expression on his face was the purest form of terror Emmett had ever witnessed on a human being. Houseman tried to run. His bad ankle, the one Emmett had noted from 60 feet away on a Friday afternoon, betrayed him on the first step. It buckled. He staggered. And then 280 pounds of Tank caught him by the windbreaker and lifted him off the ground the way a man lifts a bag of groceries one-handed. Effortless, and set him down again on his back with enough force to crack the concrete beneath him. The ankle twisted under the impact. Houseman screamed, a high, thin sound that bore no resemblance to the voice of the man who had shoved an 8-year-old girl into a van 34 hours ago. 8 seconds, from breach to silence, from door to floor. Two men neutralized, neither one having landed a single blow. But Boone was not looking at them. He was looking at the inner room, the door that Houseman had been guarding, the door that was now slightly open, the yellow light from inside spilling across the threshold like a whisper. And from behind that door a sound, not a scream, not a cry, something smaller, something that contained within it every frequency of hope and terror and disbelief that an 8-year-old voice could produce. Daddy Boone crossed the room in 3 strides. He pushed the door open. The camping lantern inside was dimmer than the one in the outer room, its battery fading, casting everything in a light, the color of old honey. The room was small, 10 by 10. Cinder block walls painted that same dead green. No windows. A bare mattress on the floor stained the kind of mattress that belonged in a dumpster, not beneath a child. And on that mattress, pressed into the corner, where the walls met her knees drawn up to her chest, her father's leather vest wrapped around her like the last wall between herself and the world. Wren. Her wrists were in front of her, the rope loose around the right one where she had worked it free and then carefully replaced it. The raw red lines on her skin were visible, even in the dim light, angry and inflamed, the evidence of hours of friction against coarse fiber. Her right arm bore the bruise, the oval mark of a man's grip, dark purple fading to green at the edges. Her lower lip was swollen where she had bitten Houseman a small split that had scabbed over and cracked again. Her pink rain boots still on her feet, still bearing the unicorn stickers she had pressed into place with her own small thumbnail, were dusty but intact. And her eyes were open, wide, locked on the doorway, on the shape that filled it, on the man she had been waiting for since the moment the van door slammed shut and the world went dark. Her eyes went from terror to recognition to something that had no name in any language Emmett knew. Something beyond relief, beyond joy. Something cellular and ancient, the thing that passes between a parent and a child when the worst is over and the world starts again. Daddy. She said it differently this time. Not a scream, not a plea, a statement, a confirmation. The sound of a child who had whispered her address into the darkness 1,400 times and had never once stopped believing that it would bring him here. Ren, baby girl, I am here. Daddy is here. Boone's voice broke on the word here. It shattered into pieces that scattered across the room like the crayon flames that had dissolved on a wet sidewalk 34 hours ago. He crossed the remaining distance, knelt beside the mattress, and reached for the ropes on her wrists. His hands were shaking. The hands that could grip a motorcycle at 100 miles an hour without wavering, that had held steady through 2 decades of rides and in fights, in the controlled violence of a life lived on the edge of what society considered acceptable. Those hands were shaking so badly he could not untie a simple knot. Doc was there a second later, medical kit already open. Penlight checking her pupils, 2 fingers on the pulse point at her wrist counting the beats against his own internal clock. She is dehydrated. His voice was clinical, controlled the voice of a man who had assessed casualties in combat zones and knew that emotion was the enemy of accuracy. Pulse is elevated but strong. Bruising on the right arm consistent with forcible restraint. Rope burns on both wrists, superficial to moderate, no arterial involvement. Small laceration on the lower lip partially healed. Likely self-inflicted during resistance. He almost smiled. The crack in his clinical armor. She fought back, Doc said. Of course she did. Boone's voice was barely a whisper. She is a Coulter. Doc pulled an IV kit from his bag. Ren watched him with eyes that were wary, but not afraid. She knew Doc. She knew his hands. She knew the caduceus tattoo on his forearm, and the gentle way he always said, now this might pinch a little before any needle. Small pinch, kiddo, Doc said. Ren did not flinch. The saline drip started. Doc taped the line to the back of her hand with the care of a jeweler setting a stone. He checked her pupils again, checked her temperature with a forehead scanner, pulled a thermal blanket from the kit, and wrapped it around her shoulders over the vest. She is going to be okay, he said. Physically, the dehydration is manageable. The bruising will heal. The rope burns will scar, but they will fade. He looked at Boone. The rest is going to take time. Boone nodded. He did not trust his voice. Ren reached up and put her arms around her father's neck. She held on with a strength that should not have been possible from a 51-pound girl who had not eaten in 34 hours. She held on like the world was trying to pull her away, and she had decided finally and completely that she was done letting it. Boone held her back. In the doorway, Emmett watched. He did not know he was crying until he felt the tears hit the collar of his hoodie. Hot tears. The kind that come not from sadness, but from the release of something you have been carrying for so long, you forgot it had weight. He had been holding his breath since 3:52 on a Friday afternoon, and now in a room that smelled like mold and saline and motor oil, he finally let it go. She was alive. She was in her father's arms. And he had done that. Not alone, not without help, but the chain of events that led from a white van to this moment, from a scream to a rescue from 200 people, who looked away to 97 who rode through the night that chain had started with him, with a boy in a broken car who saw a girl who needed help. By the time the police arrived, everything was already over. Dominic Ferris lay face down on the warehouse floor, zip-tied and barely conscious. His left shoulder was dislocated, his nose was broken. He would later tell police he had fallen down some stairs, a claim that was undermined by the absence of any staircase near where he was found. Clint Houseman was in worse shape. His already compromised ankle had buckled completely under Tank's intervention, and he sat whimpering against a wall, unable to stand his previous menace, evaporated like breath on a cold window. The third man, the one with the baseball cap, the go-between, had given up everything before the police even arrived. His name was Curtis Devlin, 26 years old. He worked part-time as a groundskeeper at a church 3 blocks from Riverside Elementary. He had been hired through a contact he refused to name to deliver food and serve as a lookout. But that was not all Curtis Devlin had done. When Gravel leaned close to him in the hallway, close enough that the young man could see every line in the old detective's face and every year of violence and justice carved into those lines, Curtis Devlin told him something that made the blood drain from Gravel's knuckles. "There is someone at the school," Curtis whispered. "A woman. She gave them everything. The girl's schedule, her photograph, which door she used, what time dismissal ended. Even told them the father rode a motorcycle so they would know to use a van instead. She got paid $10,000 for the information. Who, I do not know her name. I just know she works in the office. Secretary or administrator, something like that. She met with Dominic twice, once at a coffee shop on J Street, once in the school parking lot after hours. Gravel straightened. He looked at Boone. The father's expression had gone from relief to something darker, something that burned slow and deep, like coal, after Gravel said, "We deal with that after." When the Sacramento police arrived at 3:12 in the morning, Detective Karen Lindquist took one look at the scene and understood that the report she would write about this night would be the most complicated of her career. She had worked with Gravel in his police days. She knew him, she trusted his instincts. And when he handed her a thumb drive containing GPS data, physical descriptions, timeline analysis, and eyewitness testimony from a 13-year-old with a photographic memory, she did not question the source. "You could have called us," she said. "Boone did call you." Gravel's voice was iron. At 4:30 on Friday afternoon, when he first realized Wren was missing, "Your department told him to wait 48 hours before filing a report." That was 17 hours ago. Lindquist closed her eyes. The expression on her face was not anger or defensiveness. It was shame. "That is not protocol," she said quietly. Protocol almost got an 8-year-old girl killed. The conversation ended there. In the days that followed, the guilty witnesses came forward. Some came voluntarily. Most did not. Darla Pemberton was 46 years old. She drove a silver Lexus SUV. She lived in a house with a 3-car garage in a neighborhood where the Homeowners Association sent letters about the acceptable height of decorative hedges. She had 2 children of her own, a golden retriever named Biscuit, and a bumper sticker that read, "In this house, we believe kindness matters." When 2 Hells Angels knocked on her door at 7:15 on a Saturday morning, she nearly swallowed her tongue. "Mrs. Pemberton." Gravel stood on her porch with his hands visible and his voice level. "At 3:52 yesterday afternoon, you were in the pickup line at Riverside Elementary. A little girl was grabbed by 2 men and forced into a van. She ran toward your car. She was screaming for help. You rolled up your window and locked your doors." Darla's face cycled through every shade between pink and white. "We have security footage. We have your license plate. We have witnesses who saw you look directly at her and drive away." "I did not." She stopped. She could not finish the lie. It was too big and too recent, and the man standing on her porch was too calm and too certain. "She was wearing that vest," Darla whispered. "The skull, the patches. I thought it was a family dispute. Biker people. I did not want to get involved. I have children of my own. I cannot take risks. What if you had gotten out of your car and asked one question?" Gravel's voice did not rise. It did not need to. One question. "Sweetie, are you okay?" That is all it would have taken. Instead, you saw leather and decided she deserved whatever was happening to her. Darla's hands shook. That little girl was held for 34 hours because people like you decided she was not worth the inconvenience of helping. She was dehydrated. She had rope burns on her wrists. She bit one of her kidnappers hard enough to draw blood because she was fighting to survive. 8 years old. "I am sorry." Darla was crying now, real tears. The kind that come from the sudden, nauseating recognition of who you are versus who you thought you were. "Do not apologize to me." Gravel handed her a card with the Sacramento Police Department's number. "Call this number. Tell them what you saw and why you did not act. And spend some time thinking about that bumper sticker on your car. The one about kindness mattering." He walked away before she could respond. Roy Gladwell was 71 years old. He had been the crossing guard at Riverside Elementary for 9 years. He had a grandchild in 2nd grade. He knew every family, every car, every routine. He was the kind of man who waved at every child and called them by name and sincerely believed that he was making a difference. When Wren had grabbed his arm on Friday afternoon and said, "They took me, call 911, he had patted her head and told her to find her daddy. Now sitting in his kitchen on Saturday morning with Professor Aldridge across the table, a man with kind eyes and a counselor's degree and a leather vest that seemed to contradict, both Roy Gladwell could not stop his hands from shaking. "I saw her every morning." His voice was a crumbling wall. "She always waved. She always smiled. And when she needed me, I did not listen. Why not, I do not know." He stared at his hands. "She was always so dramatic. Always running around playing pretend, making up stories about adventures. I thought she was doing it again. I thought she was playing a game." "Some children do that," Professor said. His voice was gentle but did not bend. But the ones who grab an adult's arm and say, call 911 are not playing pretend, Mr. Gladwell. Those are the children who need us to pay attention. Roy wiped his eyes. How do I fix this? You cannot. Not completely. But you can make sure it never happens again. You can tell the police what you saw. You can testify if there is a trial. And you can spend the rest of your time at that school actually listening when a child says something is wrong. Roy nodded. It was all he had. Dr. Constance Whitfield was the last. She was in her office on Saturday afternoon preparing for a board meeting that would never happen the way she planned when Boone Coulter appeared in her doorway. He was not alone. Wren stood beside him, clean clothes. Doc had treated her wrists, the bandages neat and white against her skin. Professor had talked to her gently, carefully, with the expertise of a man who understood that trauma in children is not a wound you stitch, but a landscape you help them learn to navigate. She was not healed. Healing would take months, perhaps years, but she was standing, and she was holding her father's hand, and she had asked specifically to come here. Dr. Whitfield. Boone's voice was the temperature of deep space. My daughter has something to say to you. Whitfield's face went the color of old paper. She stood behind her desk as if it could protect her, as if the brass nameplate and the bronze plaque and the framed certificates on the wall formed some kind of shield. Wren, sweetheart, I am so glad you are safe. I want you to know that we took every precaution. I am not your sweetheart. Wren's voice was small but carried the weight of something far larger than her body. You told the boy he was lying. You told him you would call the police on him. He was trying to help me. He was the only one who tried. I followed protocol. What protocol says you threaten a child for reporting a crime? Boone stepped forward. One step. Controlled. Precise. What protocol says you ignore eyewitness testimony because the witness is homeless? What protocol says student safety is our priority? When my daughter was being shoved into a van 50 feet from your office, Whitfield's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing came out. I have already filed complaints with the school board, the district superintendent, and the Department of Education, Boone said. But I want you to know something. That boy you dismissed. His description of the kidnappers was so accurate that the FBI used it to link these men to 3 other abductions across 2 states. His license plate number led us directly to the warehouse where they were holding Wren. He did what you refused to do. He paid attention. He listened. He acted. Boone paused. You are going to lose your job. That is already in motion. But I want you to remember every day for the rest of your life that my daughter is alive because a homeless boy did not stop trying even after you tried to silence him. He turned, took Wren's hand, walked toward the door. At the threshold, Wren stopped. She looked back at the bronze plaque on the wall behind Whitfield's desk. Student safety is our priority. That is a lie, Wren said, and then she left. Dominic Ferris confessed on a Sunday morning. Sitting in a federal holding cell, dislocated shoulder in a sling, broken nose packed with gauze, he looked smaller without the leather jacket. Just a man, 43 years old, former Marine. They paid $75,000 cash, he told the FBI, for a little girl. He stared at the wall. When she said, I do not know you, and tried to run, I almost stopped. Even tied up, she kept fighting, kept saying her address over and over, like a prayer. I almost let her go. Why did you not? Because they would have killed me. Clint Houseman never apologized. He lawyered up, refused to cooperate, and maintained he had been set up. The bite mark on his wrist, the crescent of an 8-year-old girl's teeth, had become infected by the time he reached the holding facility. Curtis Devlin cooperated fully. His testimony led investigators to the school insider. Marjorie Sefton, 54 years old, administrative assistant at Riverside Elementary for 6 years. Access to student records, dismissal schedules, security cameras. She had been paid $10,000 to provide Wren Coulter's photograph schedule and exit route. $10,000 for the life of a child who said good morning Mrs. Sefton every day when she walked past the front office. When the FBI arrested her, she was watching television with a glass of wine. She asked if she could finish it first. 12 years in federal prison. On Monday morning, Boone Coulter took the stand. The federal courthouse in Sacramento was a building designed to make people feel small. Marble floors that turned every footstep into an announcement. Ceilings high enough to echo. The kind of silence that existed not because there was no sound, but because the sounds that existed were swallowed by the scale of the space. In the gallery, 47 Hells Angels sat in 3 rows. Their vests were cleaned, their faces were still. They were not there to threaten. They were there to witness, to sit in those wooden pews and watch their brother do the thing that men like Victor Maddox spent their entire lives making sure people were too afraid to do. Tell the truth. In the front row, Wren sat between Doc and Professor. Her wrists were bandaged. Her father's vest was draped over the back of her chair within reach, but not on her shoulders. She had chosen to sit without it today, a decision that Professor noted and understood. She was learning to feel safe without armor. Mr. Coulter. The prosecutor's voice was steady and clear. Can you describe what you witnessed at the truck stop on January 15th of last year? Boone looked at the defense table. Victor the Ghost Maddox sat in an orange jumpsuit, his expression carefully blank, the face of a man who had spent his life learning to show nothing. Behind that blankness, Boone could see it. Fear. The particular fear of a man who had built his empire on the silence of others and was watching that silence end. Then Boone looked at Wren, at the bandages on her wrists, at the fading bruise on her arm, at the eyes that were his eyes, hazel, steady, unbroken. Yes, ma'am, he said. I can describe exactly what I saw. For 2 hours he did. Every detail, every face, every gunshot. The defense attorney cross-examined for 40 minutes. He challenged Boone's credibility, his associations, his lifestyle. He asked whether a man who wore a Hells Angels patch could be trusted to tell the truth. Boone answered every question with the same steady voice, the same unshakable certainty of a man who had learned that truth was not a burden, but a weapon. In the gallery, Wren watched her father. She did not fidget. She did not look away. The jury deliberated for 67 minutes. They returned with guilty on all counts. Victor Maddox would spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. No possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, the courtroom was silent for 3 full seconds before anyone moved. Then the prosecutor closed her file. The defense attorney put his hand on Maddox's shoulder and said nothing because there was nothing left to say. And in the front row, Wren squeezed Doc's hand and whispered 2 words. Daddy did it. Doc squeezed back. Yes, little one. He did. The vote happened at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning, 1 week after the rescue. Preacher stood at the head of the long table in the clubhouse. Around him, the brothers who had answered the call sat in their usual places. Coffee cups and motorcycle keys scattered across the surface, like the debris of ordinary lives lived by extraordinary men. We found Ironside's daughter because of a boy, Preacher said. Emmett Sykes, 13 years old, living in a car with his mother because the world decided they were not worth helping. He paused. His gray eyes swept the room. The world was wrong, and I am proposing we do something about it. The chapter fund had enough for first month's rent in a security deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Sacramento. Not luxury, not even comfortable by most standards, but walls, a roof, a door that locked, a kitchen with a stove that worked, a bathroom with hot water. The things that most people never thought about because they had never lived without them. Preacher continued. Nadine Sykes has 11 years of experience as a 911 dispatcher. I have reached out to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. They have an opening. They are willing to interview her Monday. He looked around the table. All in favor, silence. The clock on the wall ticked. A motorcycle rumbled past on the street outside. Then every single hand went up. Not a moment's hesitation. Not a single dissenting voice. 97 men voting unanimously to change the lives of a woman and a boy they had known for 1 week. Motion carries. Preacher smiled. A rare event. The kind of smile that cracked the granite of his face and revealed something warm beneath. Gravel. Make it happen. Gravel nodded. And somewhere in the next room, asleep on a pull-out couch that was not completely terrible, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like leather and coffee, Emmett Sykes did not yet know that his life had just changed forever. Boone held the box like it contained something alive. He had asked Gravel to arrange the meeting. Just the 3 of them. No other brothers, no spectators, just a father, a daughter, and the boy who had saved them both. They met at the clubhouse in a small room with leather couches and a coffee table covered in motorcycle magazines. The late afternoon light came through a window that someone had cleaned for the occasion, and the dust motes drifted in the gold like tiny planets in a tiny universe. Wren sat next to her father. Her boots squeaked against the floor as she swung her legs. The new ones. Same pink, same unicorn stickers reapplied with the same careful precision. The rope burns on her wrists had started to heal, still visible, pink and shiny, but no longer raw. Emmett Boone said. His voice was thick. I have been riding with my brothers for 19 years. I have seen a lot, done a lot, but I have never owed someone as much as I owe you. Emmett shifted. The couch was soft beneath him, softer than anything he had sat on in 7 months. His new watch, the one his mother had bought for $3 at a thrift store to replace the broken one, read 2:47 in the afternoon. You do not. Please, let me finish. Emmett nodded. When I got the call that Wren was not at school, Boone said, when I realized nobody could tell me where she was, when the police told me to wait 48 hours, I thought I had lost her. I thought my little girl was gone and there was nothing I could do. He looked at Emmett. And then Gravel called. And he told me about you, about what you saw, about how you tried to tell 4 different adults and every single one of them dismissed you, about how you were sitting on a curb crying because you thought you had failed. Boone's voice cracked. You did not fail, Emmett. You were the only person at that school who cared enough to pay attention. The only person who saw my daughter as a human being worth saving. Everyone else saw a biker's kid in a leather vest and decided she was not their problem. Wren leaned forward. You remembered my boots, she said. The squeaky ones. Emmett blinked. Yeah, I did. How I do not know. I just hear things and they stay. My mom says it is because I pay attention. Most people do not really listen. They just wait for their turn to talk. Wren nodded. I recited my address, she said. The whole time. 1462 Ardon Way, over and over. Daddy taught me that. That was smart. So was what you did. Wren's voice was quiet but carried the certainty of someone who had survived something terrible and emerged with a clarity that most adults never achieve. Nobody else tried to help me, just you. Boone cleared his throat. Which brings me to this. He opened the box. Inside, resting on a cushion of dark velvet, was a watch. Not expensive, not flashy. The kind of simple, functional timepiece you could buy at any department store. Silver case, black leather, band, white face with clean numbers. But this one gleamed, this one worked, and engraved on the back in letters so small Emmett had to turn it toward the window light to read them. E.S., the one who saw, November 15th, 2024. The date you saved my daughter, Boone said. The date you proved that one person paying attention can change everything. Emmett's hands shook as he lifted the watch from the box. He had worn his broken watch for 2 months, had checked it compulsively hundreds of times a month even though it always read 3:47 because the ritual anchored him to something stable in a world that had none. This new watch was more than a replacement. It was evidence, proof that someone had seen him. Not as a homeless kid, not as a problem, not as a nuisance to be escorted off campus, as Emmett Sykes, 13 years old, the one who saw. Thank you, he whispered. Boone reached out and put his hand on Emmett's shoulder. Heavy, warm, the hand of a man who had almost lost everything and understood down to the marrow that gratitude was not a word but an action. No kid. Thank you. 6 months later. The apartment was small, but it was theirs. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window that caught the morning light, a bathroom with hot water. On the counter, a list of resources Gravel had typed himself thorough, the work of a man who understood that escaping homelessness was a daily process. Nadine Sykes was a 911 dispatcher again, not for Sacramento, but for the neighboring county. She still cried sometimes in the shower. But they were different tiers now. Emmett was back in school, Lincoln Middle School, 8th grade, a building full of strangers who did not know about the Honda Accord or the eviction or the 7 months of parking lots. He kept mostly to himself. He sat near windows. He watched. Some habits do not break. Some habits should not. His new watch, the one with the inscription on the back, read 2:37 when the text came through on a Saturday afternoon. Party at the clubhouse, Saturday. 3 p.m. You and your mom are invited. Gravel. Emmett smiled. The clubhouse had become a second home, not officially. He would never wear a patch. He was 13 years old, and his future held things that did not involve motorcycles and leather things like college and a career, in the life his mother had been fighting to give him since the day the eviction notice appeared on their door. But he was welcome there. The brothers knew his name, they knew what he had done, and they treated him not like a child to be protected, but like a person to be respected. The party was for Ren's 9th birthday. Red and white streamers hung from the clubhouse rafters. A three-tiered cake dominated the center table, chocolate with raspberry filling, because Doc had asked Ren 17 times what flavor she wanted, and she had finally declared that chocolate raspberry was the only acceptable answer for a person of her maturity and sophistication. 97 motorcycles filled the parking lot, chrome polished, engines silent. The machines of men who had ridden through the darkest night of one family's life and were now here for the simplest, best reason: to celebrate a little girl turning 9. Gravel stood near the bar with a root beer. Nadine stood beside him, laughing at something he said. She looked different now. The braced for impact stance had softened into something upright and open, the stance of a woman standing on solid ground. Emmett stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. Because that was what he did. That was what he would always do, the boy who saw. Ren spotted him first. Emmett, she ran across the room. Pink rain boots, brand new but already bearing unicorn stickers applied with surgical precision, squeaking against the concrete floor. She hit him with a hug that nearly knocked him backward. He caught his balance. Caught her. Held on. You came. Of course I came. I am 9 now. She said it like a press conference. The most significant announcement in human history. That is basically a teenager. That is not how math works. Close enough. She laughed. He laughed. And across the room, Boone Coulter watched them with hazel eyes that were dry and clear and full of something that did not need a name because everyone in the room already knew what it was. Later, after the cake was cut and the sparklers were lit, and Ren had declared that she would never remove her new helmet pink with flame decals sized perfectly for the back of her daddy's Harley Preacher, called for silence. The room went quiet. 6 months ago, he said, I stood in this room and asked you to help a boy and his mother. People we did not know. People the system had forgotten. And every single one of you said yes. He looked at Emmett. Today I want to acknowledge what that yes became. Emmett Sykes is back in school. His mother is back at work. They have a home. They have stability. They have a future. He paused. But more than that, they have family. Not blood, not patches, just people who saw them, who chose them, who refused to let them fall through the cracks of a world that does not always care about people like us. Preacher raised his glass. To Emmett Sykes, the one who saw. 97 glasses rose into the fluorescent light, the one who saw. Emmett's eyes burned. He did not look away. He did not hide the tears that slipped down his cheeks. Not from shame, not from exhaustion, not from the memory of a curb where he had sat alone and believed that he was nothing. These were the tears of someone who had been invisible and was finally seen. Beside him, Ren squeezed his hand. Her grip was strong, stronger than it should have been for a girl who weighed 53 pounds and had just eaten 2 pieces of cake. And Emmett held on. He checks his watch now, out of habit, not compulsion. The face reads whatever time it actually is. The hands move the way hands are supposed to move forward, always forward, measuring not the moments he has lost, but the ones he has left. The inscription on the back has faded slightly from 6 months of wear, from showers and school days and Saturday rides to the clubhouse where 97 men call him by name. But he knows what it says. He traces the letters sometimes late at night when his mother is asleep in the next room, and the apartment is quiet and the world outside the window is dark and still, and full of people who need someone to see them. E.S., the one who saw, November 15th, 2024. He was 13 years old when he saved a little girl's life. He was nobody to everyone who should have noticed him, and he changed everything. You do not need 97 motorcycles to change someone's world. You do not need a leather vest or a road name or a chapter vote. You do not need permission from a system that was never built to help people like Emmett Sykes or Ren Coulter or Nadine Sykes or any of the invisible people who sit on curbs and sleep in cars and whisper their addresses into the darkness, hoping someone will hear. You just need to see, really see. And then you need to act. Somewhere right now, there is a child who needs someone to believe them. A neighbor whose lights are always off. A boy sitting in a car across from a school watching, remembering, waiting for someone to ask him what he knows. You can be the person who rolls up the window, or you can be the one who kneels. 3 words. That is all it takes. I believe you.